welcome to the Unlock Your Limitless Potential podcast. I am your host, Amy Moore, also known as Amy Hates Carrots, and I am a transformational coach, a trainer of many subconscious, somatic, and energetic modalities, and a spiritual business mentor who is here to support you in quieting that darn carrot-chasing ego, aligning to what your soul is calling you to instead, and diving deep within to activate the limitless potential and wisdom that already exists within you now. On this podcast, you'll learn all about your inner world, how to create the reality that you want, how to make decisions that support your truest, most limitless self, and how to create positive and lasting change in your life and your soul-driven business. Thank you so much for being here today. Let's dive in, shall we? Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Unlock Your Limitless Potential. Today, I am joined by the amazing Matthew Ashdown, who is a teacher, he's a guide, he's a writer, and he has dedicated his life to exploring the depths of the human potential, which is so in alignment with this podcast, right? He has spent over 20 years studying various spiritual traditions, and his journey led him to the wonderful gene keys, which we're going to dive way deeper into in this episode. But if you are new to them, they are a powerful system for personal transformation and evolution. So I met Matthew a few years ago inside of the Gene Keys Facebook group. I was a bit more towards the beginning of my journey with my Gene Keys at the time, and he provided the most beautiful reading for me that really, it opened my heart to these new depths of contemplation, and it really just helped me start to piece things together in a new way. Plus, I had never really witnessed someone taking the Gene Keys work and using it as a support tool for how they work with others. And that just opened all these other doors for me. So I am just so grateful for him, the role that he played in shining light on my path ahead, and so excited to talk to him today. So he is a Gene Keys guide, a facilitator. He leads workshops. He does one-on-one work, online and in-person events, and his approach to the Gene Keys is just so beautiful. It's rooted in compassion and intuition and just really understanding your human potential. So welcome, Matthew. I'm so excited to geek out with you today about all things Gene Keys.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, I'm very much excited for it too. I hope your listeners are ready.
Yes, they will be. I love it. So, would you want to kind of just start a little bit talking about what they are for somebody that is brand new to them or kind of just starting out on their journey? And then as you do that, how you started your journey with them?
Yeah, let's see how I can weave that in together then, because it's one of the first things when people ask, what's the Gene Keys? It's like, well, it's this huge, voluminous body of work that just brings so much into so many different areas of my life. And I would say, to simplify it as best we can, it's a self-contemplative path where we can come to reflecting on our own uniqueness in the world, our own unique expression. A lot of people are drawn to this when they're exploring purpose. What's my purpose in life? And what am I here to do? And it's based upon what happens is we generate a chart that's based upon our birth time, our birth date, our birth location. So it's this imprint of one moment in time that gets stretched across our lifetime. And so it draws upon wisdom from the I Ching, the Book of Changes, and the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. And it also draws upon Buddhism, and it draws upon other different traditions and wisdom traditions that just bring so much to life. And for myself, I'd explored a number of different spiritual paths, I guess you could say. And I came to the Gene Keys at a time when I was really wanting to know that purpose more so. And at the time, I still do work with a Kriya Yoga tradition, and the yoga master that transmits that, as if you like, to the world would say that man's only purpose on earth is to seek God. And I was like, I need something a little bit more specific. I can
Could
seek
you
God.
narrow that down a little?
Yeah,
Just a
yeah,
little.
exactly. And so then the Gene Keys crosses my path, and it's like, oh, wow. And so I discovered it, or it discovered me, or it came into my world. Like this, it tends to be the number of people I meet. And I just had this weekend. I've got the Gene Keys book up on my shelf. It's been there for 3 years, but I've never touched it, and it's like they're drawn to it. And it's like a seed that kind of blossoms in its own timing. There's no forcing of this. And so for me, it started off like I came at it from a very headstrong approach, I guess you could say. I read the book, I read My Unique Gene Keys, and I was like, oh, this really resonates for me. And then it was about 2 or 3 years later. So that was in 2012, I think. And when I came across it this first time, I was integrating it through my own studies, and there was no um, golden path course in its entirety like there is today. And so what ended up happening is there's some big events going on in my life, and I was looking at my Gene Keys chart, but then there was things like I didn't quite understand what's a line number, what's this pathway, and things like that. And so I ended up meeting with Peter Tung, who is he's a Gene Keys ambassador, and he's one of I sort of credit him with opening many, many people up to the world of Gene Keys, and he was the one who kind of was that portal for me in that way. And we did a session, and in it, he took me into this exploration of something that everybody explores in their Gene Keys, which is this idea of our core wound. And this idea that guilt was my core wound was something I was quite familiar with in some ways, but I hadn't seen a pathway through it. And from that moment on, a lot of things began to shift, and gradually over time, it just really permeated my life more and more. And then eventually I kind of opened up to this, like, wow, I'd love to share this with others. I love what this has done for me. And there's the part of me that just loves sleuthing these things out. As much as I've got, a very intuitive kind of way of being, there's also this detective aspect of me that loves to see the patterns. And so just throughout these years, and these last 5 years has been a real kind of like deep immersion and working with groups of people and facilitating it. And just, I love seeing people lit up in their gifts, whatever those gifts are. And the more of us that are living our gifts in the world, the brighter this world becomes. And for so many of us, we've worked in professions we didn't enjoy, or we've shut our gifts down because of our conditioning from school or from family or from religion. And this gives us permission to be ourselves. And so it offers these guideposts, and there's nothing fixed or rigid about them. But they give it's like this living transmission that just comes alive in your life. So there's many more things I can say on it, but that's kind of been my pathway to it. And really, in the essence, it's like, yeah, working with this to help ourselves understand ourselves more, but also understand the communities that we're part of a little bit more.
Yes. Oh my God. So beautifully said. I love that. And I love your investigative spirit too. I have that. I think when I first found it, I made like my spreadsheet and I had my little task list. I'm going to do this many days a week and this and this. And I'm like, as soon as you start diving in, it's like, that is not what this is about. This is
Yeah.
a lifetime of contemplation. We're taking our time here. We are doing this out of devotion for ourselves and like understanding our truest self. And yeah, I feel like it is a true coming home to that, like to the remembering of who you really are. And yeah, living in a world where your gifts are these natural, beautiful things that you get to embrace. And you just may not have had like the right word for it before, or had like clarity on what specifically it is. And that's kind of what it did for me. It provided more detail and just gave words to feelings, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and when we were working with it, I think one of the ideas, I think this was something I would say from my own journey with it as well, was that I've been introduced to this concept of the shadow through previous teachers. And so this idea of the shadow, and so for people who are new to that word, it really stems from the work of Carl Jung in many ways. But it's this idea that there's these unconscious parts of ourselves that can be creating all kinds of trouble and turbulence in our life and in our world. And these are the parts of ourselves that we've somehow disassociated from. It's like, oh, I don't like that part of me, so I'm kind of pushing it through, pushing it away. And I think if there's anything that really emerges from the work of Gene Keys that I absolutely love, is that we come to accept and embrace all those parts of ourselves, because we realize, oh, every shadow contains a gift. Oh, so within, like you said, that word, I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And I had this notion from my previous teachers that, oh yeah, we do the shadow work because there is, within the darkest dark is the brightest light. And to be able to have that courage to go in there and embrace that. And at the same time, it was like, I might work with a particular gene key and say the shadow is judgment, for instance. And it's like, oh, I don't like being a judgmental person. I don't like being judged. Oh, and it's like, but being able to recognize and see where I'm being judgmental, how I'm being judgmental, might actually point to what the gift of this one is, which is the gift of integrity. So this is in Gene Key's terminology, this is the 18th Gene Key. So it moves from the shadow of judgment to this gift of integrity. And so now, this shadow has a different kind of tone to it and this ring to it, because it's like the gift of the 18th Gene Key is the ability to see flaws. It's just how we see them and how we work with them. So at the shadow frequency, I'm just judging everybody for their flaw, for what I see as their flaws. And it's just like, oh, I'm getting off on judging these people, right? But the gift is like, oh, no, this is about integrity. So I see these flaws and I see this room for change and improvement. And now I'm going to do something creative about that. And so it's like, recognizing the shadow is an important part of it. It's like the seed for the flower that blooms, but until I embrace that, so now it's like, I want to know where those shadow aspects are hiding within me, because once I do, it only causes the gift to shine a little bit more brightly. And so I feel like that's, a lot of times that's what people are drawn to the Gene Keys for too, is they're feeling aspects of themselves like this, where it's like, oh, if the world saw me like this, they'd see this part of me. And it's like, well, you see that now, let's really witness what that is for. And that every shadow like this, whether it's judgment or God, I'm drawing a blank now suddenly, a judgment or intolerances or impatience, it's like they all they're all seeds for a future gift that is flowering.
Yes. And it just kind of goes to that bigger picture where you get to see that all of the parts of you serve a beautiful purpose. Like no part should be left out. It's all who you are, and you are this whole beautiful multidimensional being that is capable of so many things. But by trying to repress these parts of us, and there are parts of us, they just want to be seen, they want to be known, they want to be loved, they want to be acknowledged. And there we are, just like trying to ignore it, trying to sweep it under a rug, trying to pretend it doesn't exist. But yeah, the magic is in discovering what those are, having the awareness of them, and then giving them what they need. And usually that's just the being seen, like that they matter, they serve a purpose, and just allowing them to know that. So yeah, comes from a place of love, loving all the parts of you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying there too, um, what am I trying to say here? Gene Keys is about taking pauses. So in these times, it's like,
Yes.
it's really here's that moment where Matthew has a brilliant thought he wants to share, and it disappears from his mind, and he can't retrieve it. So it's like, oh, this is what this is. This is for that pause, and I think that's probably what I would share in this is like it gives us this opportunity to slow down and notice these things that we wouldn't otherwise notice, that we might just kind of gloss over, or and like you said, it just we get this opportunity to draw it all in, to remember it, to pull it in, and to bring that awareness to it. Absolutely. So I think it's this pause that can lead to a pivot, a shift, a change in somewhere in our life, and gives that opportunity for the insights to drop in, because otherwise we're moving so damn quickly in this world, in a world that demands speed. To be the person that's willing to slow down and pause, it can be a bit uncomfortable at first. I know it was for me, as somebody who was a go, 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 go kind of guy. But the more I paused, the more I was able to see these aspects, and the more there was just this natural alignment and flow from which I could operate that made things a lot more easy in the world, for me and for others in that
Yes,
way.
absolutely. And I have that exact gene key 40 from inertia to determination. And which just shows like when I first started, my initial response is to make this to-do list, my gene keys to-do list, so I can be super productive and I could hustle through this and be efficient. And it's like, if anything, it just taught me so much to slow down and just allow those pauses, like you said. That was such a beautiful way to word it. And sometimes it's just so almost mind blowing, or for me, like I love words, but I didn't have the words to describe a lot of what I was feeling. And so just hearing some of these Gene Keys words for the first time, I would just sit there and like pause, the longest pause ever, and just reflect for days like, oh my gosh, that's what it's called.
Well, can you think of an example of the?
There's so many. I have my little list here. Just like, well, even just the word resolve for Gene Key 40. It's like I never knew what to call that feeling that I was experiencing, or just the to go from inertia to determination, which, oh, I think I misspoke. That's a different number.
Yes, that's the ninth gene key is the
Nine,
gift of
yeah.
determination. Yeah.
But like just having those words, it just helps me so much to understand like what state I'm in that moment,
Mhm.
especially if I'm reverting back to trying to do too much and leading myself to burnout, or kind of reliving these old loops and these old patterns and these old programs that I am in the process of unlearning. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's just very helpful to have words to
Well, I
describe.
think that's what I love about the gene keys. So for somebody, if you're coming to the gene keys the first time, you print off this chart, and it looks like there's just a whole bunch of words there. And it's like, oh my gosh, where do I begin? And we'll cover that, I'm sure, as we go through this conversation.
Yeah.
But the just the idea that these words are things that we can then begin to look at and contemplate, and to be able to, as much as, yes, there's a book you can refer to, and there's the wisdom of Richard Rudd or other gene keys guides like myself or Amy that you can turn to, it really has to become this your own experience of it, really, because it's third party when it comes to us. At the same time, that can open up portals, just like reading the book. It opens up portals because we look at this word and we take the word resolve, and it's like, yeah, well, I like to resolve things, I like to bring things to a conclusion. And so it's like, okay, so that's one understanding of this word. Now what happens when we sit with this and allow it to bake a bit, and allow ourselves to kind of pop things open, and we realize that, wow, this word resolve takes me on a way bigger journey than I ever thought. And so they become these portals to other dimensions for me, for myself personally. It's like, we can get caught up on the words, but it's about the frequencies that we're embodying. Because there are some words where somebody might look at a word, for instance, there's one where it has a gift, and it's the gift of discrimination, the 12th gene key.
Yeah.
And at the same time, that could also be seen from a shadow. It's like, well, I think of discrimination as discriminating against somebody, and there's that shadow idea of discrimination. When we're exploring here is discrimination as this ability to be able to tell the difference from what's coming from the head and what's coming from the heart, and just to really let these words crack us open. So, I always encourage new people too, is like, before you open the book, what does this word evoke for you? What happens when you sit with this?
Yeah. Like, where do you feel it in your body, and what is it actually pulling up for you? So regardless of whatever the dictionary, quote unquote, is describing that word to mean, it's like, what does it mean to you? What feelings and emotions are coming up? And yeah, just kind of sitting with that for a moment. So I guess for anyone new, similar to how you would go to a website and you enter your birth information, like for your birth chart for astrology or your human design chart, if you wanted to find something like that, Gene Keys is very similar. So you can visit the Gene Keys website, you can enter your birth information, and it's going to produce this chart for you. And that's the chart that we keep referring to. So it's just this amazing map of the cosmic coding within. As Matthew said in the beginning, it's such a simple question, like, oh, well, what are the gene keys? But it's such a profound question at the same time, because it's hard to put into words.
Absolutely. And, when I'm working one-on-one or in groups, like if I'm working with somebody who's coming to me for the first time and they bought the book and they've just kind of got their chart, the first thing that they might feel is a sense of overwhelm, as it's so big and there's so much to it. But if we can boil it down to this simple approach, that really, if we treat every gene key the same, which is, there's a shadow, there's a gift, and there's a city. So the shadow being that part of, it's the low frequency part of ourselves that we want to hide from or run from. And then we remember, oh, every shadow contains a gift. And so the gift of the gene key is released. It's like the perfume that's released as we embrace the shadow frequency. And then we have the city, and the city is kind of like the refined essence. It's almost like, I was think of like, if we're all meditating gurus on mountains, we would probably be in that state of the city. And at the same time, we live in the world and we interact with other people. And so the gift is the city in action. So we have the shadow, we have the gift, and we have the city. And this, when we approach every gene key and we see, oh, there's 3 words. Now let's see what that cracks open for me, right? And so, for instance, I think the first place that most people will come to it is their life's work gene key. That's at the top of the chart. So if you probably paused, and they probably paused and are printing off their charts or looking at their charts right now.
I hope so.
And so if we start at the top, you have this sphere, and it says life's work inside of it. And then there's a number, and that number is your gene key, and it's followed by a decimal point. So Amy, what's your life's work? I'm being nosy now.
40.4.
Oh, that's where your 40 comes in, right?
Yeah.
So you have the 40.4 there. So Amy would see that she's got the 3 words of exhaustion as the shadow, the gift of resolve,
And divine will as the city.
and the city of divine will. And then it says 40.4, and then the 0.4 refers to something called a line number, which gives it an extra flavor, if you will. So somebody with a 40.1, they've got a different experience of that 40th gene key than somebody who has a 40.4, like Amy, and each of those has a keyword. So it's like all these words now. And so our life's work is really, as it sounds, it's like it's our life's work, but it's also our our contribution to the world. Is what we do in many ways. And so it doesn't, if somebody has the 40th gene key, it doesn't mean, oh, that means you have to be this. It's not like that. The 40th gene key could fit into a number of different professions, if you like, in their own unique way. But you do tend to see trends, like people with the 40th gene key. I tend to find that they are in some way drawn to working with the physical body and health, and or working with people who are exhausted, right? It's like, you've been through it, you've evolved through it, well, you found this balance in your life, you found this gift of resolve, the difference between being caught up as a slave in the rat race versus being able to relax into your true being and operate from that space. And so the people that come to Amy are probably people who are like, I feel what you're bringing. I want to experience that too. And so our life's work is both the work that we are spending our life doing, and it's what we are also probably radiating out into the world, that the world says, oh, I'd like something. I'd like to explore that for myself. And so there's every gene key. You've got 11 in your chart. Every gene key has a different sort of quality to it. And it's based upon, there's the astrological influence, because your life's work is based upon the position of the sun at the time of your birth. And then there's other keys within the charts. You've got Jupiter, you've got Mars, you've got Venus, and they all have these different influences. And so it just becomes this fascinating exploration. But if we can just remember that we are approaching the gene keys, and somebody might look at, say, the 40th gene key, and they might see the shadow of exhaustion. Some people might say, oh, yeah, I get exhausted all the time. I get exhausted just talking about this word, right? And others might be like, oh, no, I've got lots of energy for things. And so when we talk about, so they might be living more from the gift. Now, it might be that in certain areas of life, we're living from the gift and it's beaming out of us. But in another area of life, it might be that we're actually constricted by the shadow without even being aware of it. So, and Amy, you can speak to this as well, I'm sure, but it's like these 3 words that become the kind of launch pads for the work with the gene keys are allow, accept, embrace. And if we can remember those 3 simple words, we can really simplify so much of this work. And so the allow could mean a couple of things. It could mean, I look at my gene keys chart, for instance, I've got the shadow of intolerance in one of my gene keys. The 4th gene key is the shadow of intolerance. And I could look at it and say, oh, that's not me, push it away. Well, that's intolerance possibly, right? Whereas allow would be like, okay, I'm going to allow for the possibility that there's some part of me that is emanating intolerance into the world and I don't even know it. So the allow is allowing for that possibility, and so it becomes an inquiry rather than the intellect saying, that's not me. The inquiry is, okay, let's see, I wonder, where does this shadow affect me in my life? Oh, okay. It doesn't show up so much in my work, but really in my relationship, oh, that really shows up, right? And so to be able to notice that. So at first we see it and we're like, we might be, oh, I don't like that much at all. This is why it's in the shadow, because we haven't liked it, but at least we've allowed for it. We've allowed ourselves to feel the emotion. We've allowed ourselves to witness it. And then that's where that next step is the allowing, the accepting, right? So now it's like, okay, yeah, I've been pretty intolerant in this situation or in this relationship. And I can feel myself like, there's a little bit of relaxation there because I'm accepting that. Now there's a portal for transmutation, for transformation to occur because of that acceptance. Whereas as long as I'm ignoring it or in denial of it, it stays in the shadow, and it actually limits the amount to which the gift, in this situation, the gift of understanding, is allowed to flourish. And so understanding, well, that comes from me being able to put myself in the position of the other people, to maybe try to understand what's going on in their life. And when there's intolerance there and I'm in denial of that intolerance and I think that I'm right about everything, that understanding is difficult to surmount. But now it's like, oh, wow, okay, I'm opening up here. And so that gift of understanding is able to kind of be released into the world that way. So there's the allow, the accept, and then the embrace, which is just like, it doesn't mean, oh, I'm embracing the shadow so I can stay in it and be intolerant my whole life. But there's just this, it's that next phase beyond the acceptance. It's like, oh, okay, so now when I witness this, I can maybe even, oh, there I go being intolerant again. I might be able to have a little bit of sense of humor about it, and I can relax a little bit more. And so I feel like that, if you're looking at all this complexity, to be able to simplify it to those 3 words, really, it's one of the reasons Richard Rudd, he wrote his book, The Gene Keys, which it's a book about that thick. And after many years of reflection from people and working with individuals, he decided, well, I'm going to write this book, and it's called The Art of Contemplation. And it's about the width of my hand there. It's a very thin book. And it talks about this process. So if you're somebody who can accept and retrieve a lot of information, you might love that big book and the tome that is the Gene Keys. But if you're somebody who appreciates simplicity and wants to ease into this, just having that foundational understanding of the nature of contemplation can be so valuable. Allow, accept, embrace. It's like you don't even have to know all your Gene Keys to be able to begin that work. But at the same time, like me and Amy, you'll probably get hooked on it eventually, and then you'll be like, I want more.
I want more. Give me more. Yes, that concept of the art of contemplation, that was a game changer for me, just for this experience and diving into my own Gene Keys. But in life in general, it was like, wow, I don't allow myself that space to do that with very many things. And so it's really just giving yourself permission to go at your own pace, to really sit with stuff, to embrace those pauses that we were talking about. And yeah, there's no hurry to get to the end. Like, the journey is the journey. The art of contemplation is the journey. And yeah, I'll never forget him saying those words for the first time. And I got like full body chills. I was like, oh my gosh, someone just gave me permission to slow the heck down. I mean, talk about exhaustion to resolve, right?
Yeah.
Like, it was like, I learned that first Gene Key. I was like, yes, I am in exhaustion all the time. And then I hear that concept of art of contemplation. It just all kind of meshed together so beautifully. So yeah, as you go through this, if you are brand new and you're seeing it and feeling a little overwhelmed, that is really the best thing that you can do for yourself, is just give yourself the gift of taking your time, of contemplating in whatever way feels supportive for you. So yeah, thank you so much for explaining that. That is so helpful. And those 3 words are everything.
You'll find when you get to the Gene Keys, if you can remember the simplicity of 3s, we've got the shadow, the gift, and the city, right?
Yes.
We've got allow, accept, embrace, and then so we have a lot of those, and it can just really help to simplify it in our minds. And yeah, so we're going to approach it. It can be just that simple. We don't want this work to add to people's stress. This is and if it does add to our stress, perhaps I have the 52nd Gene Key, the shadow of stress, right? So it's like, oh, perhaps this is what I'm going to meet, I remember meeting with a guy who was just starting on the Gene Keys, and he had his life's work Gene Key had the shadow of confusion and the gift of imagination. And then what's known as his evolution Gene Key, which is where his great edge of learning is in this lifetime, moves from the shadow of doubt to the gift of inquiry. And so he got this book and he was just intrigued by it. And he's like, oh, okay. And so he dived in and he read all of his Gene Keys, right? And then he came to me the next week and he's like, I'm so confused. And I said, see how this is your life's work, right? This is now, rather than running from that confusion, what's the gift? So I said, you brought this to yourself. So I think when we approach the gene keys, it's like approaching anything, is that here we are saying, okay, what's my greatest challenge in life? Okay, this is what the first pathway in the gene keys is about.
Yeah.
So it might show up in how I read and interpret the gene keys, or when we host Venus deep dives or online courses that are deep dives, then the first session can be very diagnostic in that way, and somebody might discover how impatient they are with technology, and they realize impatience is their life's work gene key. Like for me, I don't know about you, Amy, but it's like if I start to look at a gene key, I better be prepared to witness that unraveling in my life in some way. If I'm looking at the shadow of impatience, and if I crack that archetype, because these are all really archetypes, they're all these universal patterns of in the world, in the universe. And but if I contemplate impatience, patience, and timelessness, which is the fifth gene key, it's like, oh, I'll probably notice some impatience in my life. And sure enough, oh right, I'll notice where I'm impatient. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely can have that magnifying effect, like a magnifying glass just shining down on that one thing, that one lesson you need to learn in that moment, or the one thing that you need highlighted in order to not solve whatever problem you are currently in, but just kind of provide you the clarity that you are seeking in a way. So, yes, I love that. So, and then there are the three sequences that are just each their own amazing, beautiful journey. So
Absolutely.
when you first start, there's the genius, and then the Venus, and then the Pearl, which I definitely want to talk to you about because you have a wonderful program that is supporting that one right now. So, do you want to start by talking about them a little bit, like an intro?
Yeah, let's give the blip, the elevator pitch on each of them.
Sounds good.
So you'll see that we color code everything, which is great if you've got a color printer, not so great if you've got a black and white printer. But when you print off your profile, you will see that there's a few different colors to these spheres. And so they signify what are called these different sequences. So there's these three different sequences built into our profile that offer us different contemplations and reflections. So like you said there, Amy, the first one is what I've always called the activation sequence. That name really stands out for me, but is our pathway to genius. It's these four gene keys that are really give us an indication of what our unique genius is, and it's this combination of gene keys and line numbers and our life experiences that have helped to bring this to our awareness. And so we might run from the shadows and never come to really recognize our genius, but as we embrace them, and just by the name alone, the activation sequence, it's, again, if you start contemplating there, guarantee you're cracking these archetypes open for exploration in your life. So, for somebody who is wanting to know, who's maybe unsure of what their purpose is or the kind of work that they're here to do, or what these challenges are that keep showing up in your life, the activation, I mean, it's really a great place for all of us to start. It's definitely where I started. And it can really help you and support you in understanding that. The Venus sequence, which shows up as red circles on your Gene Keys profile, this is really juicy part. We go on this journey through relationships, and you can be somebody who's in a partnership at this time. You might be somebody who's single at this time. You might be looking at family relationships, but we can really bring this Venus sequence into our life to examine the gifts within relationships. And I mean, like, the challenging relationships really can be such gifts to us, when we can really begin to recognize, oh, what is this person showing me through their response to me, and vice versa. And so I loved getting the Gene Keys when I did, because it was also the same year I met my wife. And so I like to say that the Gene Keys was the manual that says, here, Matthew, you can't screw it up this time. Well, I I still made mistakes and I still make mistakes, but it has definitely offered valuable guideposts along the way. And until I really went into the depth of it, there was always this possibility that my relationship might fall apart. And there was really challenges that came along, but nothing about the other person, nothing about my wife needed to change. It was me embracing everything that the relationship was bringing to me. And as I allowed myself to really surrender into that, I mean, you could end up going on a journey through your history. There's our personal karmic path that we've walked in life and the challenges we've met. And then there's also the family and societal threads in there. So the Venus sequence is really the juiciest in many ways. And it's where we go on this deep purification or cleansing on the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual dimensions. So Venus is definitely, wow, if you're somebody who's struggling in any of those things I've talked about, Venus is a great place to work. And then the Pearl, which is the one you kind of mentioned here and the one that I'm offering guidance with at this, or coming up soon, the Pearl sequence is called this Pathway of Prosperity. And this one for me personally was a game changer, because I was somebody who was in the coaching industry and didn't resonate with so much of what that was out there in the coaching industry. And so I stepped back from it and I was kind of lost for a couple of years. And I looked at my gene keys and like, oh, being lost is part of my life's work journey. So, okay, I fully accept this, and realized, oh, I'm not actually lost. I'm just reorienting. I can't get lost. Just my mind thinking I'm lost. And then of course the guides and the gene keys work came into my life. And what I love about the prosperity sequence, because I'm sure people here have done some kind of course on abundance or prosperity. And when I first heard that about the gene keys, I'm like, not another course on prosperity and abundance. Like, this was one of my other gene key shadows, the shadow of vanity. Oh, come on, like, tell me something I don't know. And then, of course, I start reading. It's like, okay, this is something I don't know. And it was almost like, oh, this is my personal pathway to stepping into these universal laws that I hear people talking about, these universal laws of prosperity. And yet each of us has our own unique challenges and growth curve along the way. And so the Pearl sequence, this is about really coming deep into an awareness of our calling, the calling of what our heart calls us to in the world in terms of creative expression, our service to the world. And underlying the Pearl is really the great question, what Richard calls the Grail question, which I love because I was well into the Grail myths ever before I met Richard's work, is how can I be of the greatest service to the whole? So that's really what underlies the Pearl sequence. And then we have these other keys that kind of give us an idea of who we're here to serve. In pure business terms, we would call it our customers, but in the gene keys, where we like to open up to sort of heart-based relationship, it's just our community that we're here and we're serving. And then there's one of the spheres, your life's work that we've already talked about, becomes known as your brand in the Pearl. And so it's when we talk about branding in business and in coaching and in whatever field of endeavor we are in, it's like, this is how people see me and relate to me and know that this is what I can serve, how I can serve them, right? So quite often it's a case of, like we were talking about earlier, for mine, I've got the second gene key, which moves from the shadow of dislocation, which is about feeling lost and disconnected and not knowing which way I'm going, right? To the gift, which is, oh, I know where I'm going. It's orientation. There's just this knowingness. And so a lot of times I'm working with people who are feeling lost and are looking for that, just realigning with their center. And so that becomes, and the gene keys happens to be a really great way to be able to do that. So this Pearl sequence is this is your unique pathway to prosperity. And it's your unique journey through, whether you are working in business or whether you are working for others, or whether you are volunteering, or whether you are taking care of family and friends, however it is, it's like, this is your unique blueprint. And so it becomes your own. It's like, if the path, I think is it Campbell, Joseph Campbell? If the path before you is already laid out, then you're probably on somebody else's path, right? And
Yeah.
so although this offers guideposts, you might have the same pearl sequence as somebody else, but you've got your own unique path through it. And so the pearl sequence has been a game changer for me in my own personal life, in my professional life. Prosperity isn't about accumulating more and more. Prosperity is about a lightness in consciousness, and that is what I found through it. And yes, it means I have more of what I need in my life to be able to serve, more of the things that bring me joy in my life. And at the same time, without having to do the push, struggle, make it happen, it's a space of inner alignment. So I am a huge fan of the pearl, and just love sharing that with people. So those are the three: your activation sequence, your unique genius; the Venus sequence, your unique pathway to love through relationship; and the pearl sequence, the pathway of prosperity.
Prosperity. Yes. So beautiful. I love that. And I love that you are supporting people with each one, and that you have a program for prosperity, the Pearl, right now. I think too, just something to note is that as a course creator myself, it's like no one is cookie cutter. Everyone is so unique. And so that is what is beautiful about the Gene Keys too. Because if you look at the Pearl sequence through the lens of, if you do have your own business, it's like you could take a businessy course and there would be some amazing value there, of course. And you get so much from it, and you work with the creator or the coach or whoever. But with the Gene Keys, it's like, it's really diving into who you are at your core as you go through whatever journey of business that you're on. So that it kind of just like really hones in on the exact information that you need to support you the most. So I love that you are working with that right now. And another thing I just wanted to note is this is within us already. And so I think we've kind of alluded to this already, but as you discover your different keys, you really just piece together like, oh yeah, I do that all the time. Or you're able to just see what you already were doing because it's already who you are. And so an example of this is for the Pearl sequence for my life's work is also my branding. But before I knew about Gene Keys, I created Amy Hates Carrots, which is about turning down the volume on your soul's calling and just listening to your ego and just chasing all these carrots and chasing all these carrots, which of course leads to exhaustion, which of course is going to make you miserable. And so that happened naturally. The words came to me, the idea came to me, the quote unquote branding came to me because it's who I am. And then Gene Keys just so happened to like present it to me in a way that helped me piece it together differently. So it's just so amazing, like the level of self-awareness that this brings to your life. And yeah, I just love it so much.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I think as well, when somebody, like you spoke to there, that somebody might be looking to bring a business out into the world. And I love your carrot analogy and the dangling carrot. It's like, it's much better to grow carrots from the ground up with patience and nurturing, because we need
Yeah.
carrots. I need carrots for the nutrients. But when I'm having to chase one that's dangling in front of me, and it's the same as what human design is a parent, or it's a parent, it's a sibling to the Gene Keys. Well, in some ways, it is a parent to the Gene Keys, but they're seen really as sibling programs, that they kind of bring the wisdom that cross pollinates between the two, but they're also quite different. And some of the things that I learned from these two systems is about this uniqueness of my being in such a way that I realized, oh, this is why some of those other courses that somebody said, do this way and this will work for you. When you start to really understand your true nature and how strategies that work for others don't necessarily work for you, and that, like for instance, if somebody, there's a gene key called your culture that has these, and each line number gives you an indication of how you might best serve others. And so, for instance, a line 1 is for the entrepreneur. This is the person who's standing out on their own, the individual, empowering themselves to be of service to the world. A line 2, and I've seen this, is the people who are naturally drawn to work in partnerships, and they find that they excel in partnerships, right? That doesn't mean that line 1 doesn't work with other people. It's just in order to that foundation comes from birthing their own, kind of like Amy hates carrots, into the world. And then we see all these different, and it's like, oh wow, these different numbers become portals to prosperity in that way, because it's like I get to understand my own unique way of approaching this. And it's not because of any one gene key, but it's the magic, the white magic that ensues as this whole, you like that, wax on,
they come together.
yeah, exactly as they merge, as the magic just unravels with them. So, I hope it brings more ease to more people in the world of business, like you say, who struggled trying to make this winning formula work for them, and it just didn't. Some it will work for. If it's part of your natural alignment, then that will work. And and I think too, the other thing is that you might find that you dislike a current job, for instance, or work that you're doing, and your natural tendency might be want to escape, right, to move somewhere else. But you might find that through doing this shadow work and embracing the gift, that you actually start to bloom right where you are, right? And that it was actually you that was changing. Now, that's not always the case, but it can be. So it's like, it takes that focus off trying to change and force the world to be different versus, and it's not about making you better or or anything like that. It's not coming at it from a place of you're not enough. It's coming from a place of you're way more than you ever thought you were.
Yes. Oh, so beautifully said. That's a mic drop moment there.
Thank you.
I love it. Well, will you tell us about your amazing offer that you currently have, and just like your work that you do with the gene keys, so people can get in touch with you, where they can find you, all of that awesome stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, the work, I offered each of these courses at different times, the Pearl and the, it also depends what the gene keys themselves, what we're offering there. And so I have a few different passions within it. And so right now, the offering that that I have coming up is that for 10 weeks is working with a small group of people, because I like to work with my round table. It's up to 12 people. I don't take on more than that because the intimacy is lost. I like the connection and getting to know everybody within the group. And so for up to 12 people, we journey for 10 weeks through this Pearl sequence in this unlocking these themes of prosperity in our lives, looking at your own unique chart and doing this contemplation in your own time, but also coming together and learning from one another through my guidance, but also the insights of our fellow journeyers, because there's so much that just comes alive through different people dropping in a different aspect of the transmission, if you will. So that's 10 weeks, and it's once a week online, and then whatever you do in the time in between is completely up to you, because although it's 10 weeks, it will carry on for longer in our lives. And like we said before, we blossom in natural timing. We can't force it. So 10 weeks, it's all online, and you get my support obviously in between in those times. And it's this really unraveling into the Pearl. And if you're somebody who's brand new to Gene Keys, you can start there. All right. We used to say that it's best if you start elsewhere, but if your intuition says, I'm ready for the pearl, really listen. If you feel like, wow, I think I need to get a better grasp on the activation sequence, the genius, then perhaps that's where you need to go first. But I trust in the synchronicity and timing. And if it feels like it's aligned for somebody, then absolutely, even if they've never worked with it before, they can work with the pearl sequence. And if you're somebody who has worked with your gene keys a lot, it was perfect for you too. That's one of the things I love about the gene keys, is because it's a living transmission, everybody gets what they need, right? And so, and to be honest, those of us who journeyed with it the longest sometimes need the most simple reminders.
Yes.
I don't tell other people allow, accept, embrace so that they remember, and so I can
So I
remember
remember.
that. Right. Back to the
Oh
basics.
yeah, take my own advice. Yes.
Yeah.
I
So
love it.
people can reach out through my website, which is just my name, MatthewAshdown.ca. I am based up here in Canada. I'm not sure if I mentioned that
Oh yeah.
at all, but I'm on the west coast of
West.
Canada. Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay.
times are in Pacific time. And yeah, that actually begins this Monday with the Pearl. And then there's other, as you navigate the work of the Gene Keys, I'm really looking forward to what we're going to be offering in the way of something called the Dream Arc program through the Gene Keys in the next few months. And there's big plans brewing there. So it's an exciting time to align with the work of the Gene Keys and its expansion at this time. So yeah, if begin where you feel called. If it's just a simple, generate your chart and begin to mull over that, then do that. If it's pick up the book, then it's do that. But there are many ways through self-study or through exploration with others that you can work with the gene keys. So somebody, myself or Amy or other guides in the, whoever you resonate with this work can really orient you in the right direction that way.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited for your program. And that's so cool. You're going to do something with the dream arc. I am in that right now, playing
Nice.
with all the animals. And oh my goodness, it's so wonderful. I love it. And there's just so many different, I can't even speak right now, like aspects of it that, I'm still sitting with that one with the dream arc
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
taking some time with each animal, each moment that comes up, and it has been a slower pace for me than even my sequences are, but it's been really, really fun. So there's just a lot of different options with gene keys is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. If I could say so, the dream arc, for anybody wondering, you don't actually work with a Gene Keys profile. You don't have to. You can if you want to, but it's a very organic way of approaching universal wisdom and working with dreams, your own dreams, and the messaging that you receive in dreams, but also the world of creatures that we're surrounded by on a daily basis. So for my wife in 12 years has never picked up the Gene Keys book, never expressed any interest in that. When the dream arc landed, she was aligned, right?
Oh my
So
gosh.
so different people are drawn to different aspects of it. And so somebody might be listening to this, I don't get that Gene Keys thing. I just don't, it doesn't resonate. And then they meet the dream arc and it's like, oh boy, this is drawing me right in. Or vice versa. So like you said, there's so many different ways to approach this universal wisdom. And it's all magic. It's just which is the way that calls to you. So yeah, absolutely.
And just trust your intuition, because whatever way calls to you is the exact way that is going to support you so much. And
Yeah.
just even as if you spend some time on that website and just like get your chart and play with it and sit in some contemplation with the words that are there, and yeah, and then go find Matthew's Pearl program because it's gonna be so good.
Oh, I just love the pearl. Me and whatever round table gathers, it's always yeah, it's so much fun. Yeah.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for being here, Matthew, and geeking out with me today.
Thank you, Amy.
And
Yes, I love geeking out on this stuff.
we will talk soon. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you have enjoyed this episode, I would be so dang grateful if you shared it with others, subscribed to this podcast, and left an awesome review. You can also connect with me anytime on your favorite social platform at Amy Hates Carrots, or visit amyhatescarrots.com for all of my latest offers and free goodies that will help further support you on your journey. And just as a reminder, you, my dear, are truly limitless, and every single thing that you need is already within you now. You get to choose at any moment to live as the truest version of you and come home to the remembering of your unlimited power. I love you and your gorgeous soul so much, and I hope that you have a limitless day.